In the 9th year since the landing on the Trojan beach, the Achaean army mutinied against King Agamemnon, demanding to return home. Agamemnon, who believed to have displayed the ultimate willingness to achieve victory by sacrificing his own daughter, was never going to bow down to the soldiers' demands. Achilles was brought in, the most successful Achaean hero throughout the war, having subdued city after city. Together with Achilles, Agamemnon was able to suppress the mutiny, likely punishing the more vocal soldiers by death. The new grain shipment was secured from Thracia by Prince Palamedes, and everything seemed to be back in order. Palamedes had bad blood with Odysseus since the beginning of the war. He was the reason Odysseus had to leave his newborn son and even mocked the king of Ithaca throughout the war. Now was the time for the crafty Odysseus to display his trickster nature and take revenge. A fabricated letter was forged and sent to Palamedes, allegedly from the Trojan king Priam, asking the Mycenaean prince to betray his comrades to the Trojans. Also, the Trojan gold was planted into Palamedes' quarters, and after the letter and the gold were quote-unquote discovered, they were immediately brought to Agamemnon. The High King was filled with rage, and Palamedes was quickly executed for treason without being given a chance to defend himself. This would eventually cause problems as Palamedes' father, Nauplius, a minor ruler from Euboea, then traveled across Aegean to the Achaean camp in Troy in order to ask for justice, but he was turned down, with the Achaean leaders unwilling to even listen to him. This would eventually come to haunt some of the Achaeans after the war, as Nauplius had spread the word across the palaces that their rulers were all having concubines which would return with them and replace their wives. Either way, there was no justice for Palamedes, but the Achaean war intrigues only continued. The priest of Apollo, whose daughter Agamemnon took as a spoil of war after the conquest of Thebai, arrived to the Achaean camp and demanded from the Mycenaean king to return her. At first, Agamemnon bluntly refused, but then, upon being faced with a curse and not wanting to enrage the gods once more, the king agreed to return Chryses to her father. What was about to happen next would become one of the crucial turning points of the war, as Agamemnon decided to take Achilles' concubine, Briseis, as his own. Achilles was enraged, having been dishonored by Agamemnon after everything he has achieved throughout the war. The greatest Achaean hero decided that he would no longer fight. Achilles and his companions withdrew from any further battles, and the Greek army was stripped of its best warrior. This situation could be attributed to Agamemnon's ego, who would not let anyone outshine him, and even the mighty Achilles had to be shown that it was Agamemnon who was in charge. He let Achilles' forces withdraw, thinking that their help would no longer be necessary, and he could always come back and punish the insubordinate hero after the city of Troy has fallen and victory achieved. The Achaean campaigns against the Trojan allies proved to be successful, as many of them were defeated and subdued. The Achaean supplies problem also seemed to be solved, and the Trojans now realized that the enemy was not going anywhere anytime soon. The Trojan army under Hector finally sallied outside the city walls, and the new crucial battle was about to take place. The Achaean contingents were back to the main camp, and with the notable exception of Achilles and his Myrmidons, the Achaean army was back together and ready to take on the Trojans. Agamemnon was at the head of the Achaean army, while other main contingents were led by Idomeneus and Diomedes. Other Greek captains were either assigned smaller units or assisted Agamemnon and his main generals. The Trojan force was led by Hector, with the rest of the army being a combination of the Trojan contingents and allied forces, mainly led by their Mycenaean and Phrygian allies and King Sarpedon of Lycia. The direct battle was actually attempted to be prevented, as both sides agreed to a single combat between Hector's brother Paris and Agamemnon's brother Menelaus. The winner was to get Helen, although it was obvious that Agamemnon would not end the campaign as long as Troy still stands. The duel between the two heroes unraveled and favored Menelaus, the more experienced and more skilled warrior. Young Paris was badly beaten, and when the Spartan king was about to finish him off, Paris decided to run from the battlefield, breaking the rules of the single combat and escaping to the Trojan army. Disgusted Achaeans immediately moved forward, and a great battle followed. Although Hector's forces held their own, managing to inflict great damage to the Achaeans, the contingent led by Diomedes totally routed the Trojans. One of Hector's captains, Pandarus, was killed, as well as the Mycenaean commander Chromius. The Trojans were forced to retreat, and the Achaeans claimed another victory. In the following days, the two camps met at the same place. Agamemnon saw this as a chance to decisively crush the Trojan army, while Hector was hoping for a turnaround, confident that his army would finally prevail. The Achaean strategy remained the same, while the Trojans pushed for a decisive outcome. Trojans pushed hard through the contingent led by Agamemnon, and the Mycenaean king soon found himself face to face with the enemy soldiers. He was even struck by the Trojan Iphidamas, but the warrior's spear only bent against the king's shiny armor. Agamemnon then killed Iphidamas with a sword and had him stripped of his armor. Iphidamas' brother, Kun, managed to find his way through to Agamemnon, even managing to wound the king to the arm. But he too was slain, with Agamemnon striking back and chopping the Trojans' head off. On the other side, Hector was achieving critical success, routing the Achaean flank, and soon enough Agamemnon realized the seriousness of the situation. The Achaeans were ordered to withdraw to the camp, being chased by the Trojans all the way to their walls and trenches. This was the first time the Trojans managed to gain upper hand over the Achaeans, and the first time Agamemnon was ever forced to retreat. The Achaeans then applied to Achilles to have him back on the battlefield, but the hero turned them down, refusing to fight. The internal problems among the Achaeans continued into the next day, and the Trojans, wasting no time, decided to act and capitalize on their earlier success. In the early morning hours, the Trojan army broke into the Achaean camp, slicing through the unorganized Greeks. The Achaeans quickly regrouped and pushed back, but the Trojans had already reached the beach and started setting fire to some of the Achaean ships. It was at this time that the crucial attempt to save the Achaean cause was made, not by Achilles, but by his best friend and close relative, Patroclus. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, as this is a one-person production and it greatly helps the visibility of the channel. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Leckie, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to become a Patreon member, please click the link in the video description. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.